Betsy and Thomas here for the American Intelligence Media. We have so many things to cover. I don't want to exclude anything, but just to give you a highlight, we're going to be talking about the spies that Comey placed in the Trump campaign and administration. We're going to talk about the social medias and what's going on there. Now they're flailing about that they want to become public utilities. So many other things that we need to catch people up on. But let me say this to those who are very concerned about where to go to get truth news. We highly recommend that every day you follow the Trump tweets. He's putting up the relevant information that patriots around the world need to know. Now, Thomas, the conclave, Betsy, we always keep an eye on these things. And if we see that Trump's team is misleading him someplace, for example, on the stance of 5G, we're going to call it out for you. Between looking at Trump tweets or watching our cat report and then following all your other favorite independent media channels, you should be able to walk away and know what the day's top events are.
Correct, Betsy. We assume all of this is self-evident.
Let's get started on the social medias. For a few weeks back, there were all of them coming out saying, please break us up into monopolies. And then now we see they're creating a stir trying to think that the answer for all of us is making them a public utility, which at one time we had recommended, but since we've done more research, we say that really isn't the answer.
What we had previously said is that the United States government should seize all of these social media operations, including the internet, because we already own 40 to 45% of it, and that we should put all the people in jail who were involved with the weaponization of it, who were quite conscious of it. Now, this is very difficult to do, and let's try to characterize what it is that Trump is going through. Trump has just awakened to the full reality that the U.S. military, the Department of Defense, DARPA, In-Q-Tel, through Highlands Forum, has always owned the internet and controlled it and weaponized it. And once Obama came to power and he added to the National Defense Authorization Act the concept that he could legally propagandize Americans, and then he set up the Global Engagement Center to do exactly that, the Department of Defense has been able to act within the boundaries of America to propagandize Americans because of the U.S. Patriot Act, indicating that all American citizens are, in fact, questionably war actors or terrorists. So therefore, everyone on the internet can be considered a terrorist, that domestic or foreign, doesn't matter. So once you put this in perspective, Donald Trump, when he recently said, okay, I'm putting an end to the fact that the social media is censoring free speech and squelching conservative voices, kicking them off, demonetizing the alternative news, on and on and on, as well as taking all of your privacy and throwing it to the winds and selling all of your data to the highest bidder. Now it's actually free. And then putting devices now, Alexa and Siri and all these devices, into your environment as spy devices. Quite clearly, even your television. Spy devices, every screen that you have is an ear. That's the way to look at that, because every screen can act as an antenna. Whether your computer is on or not, whether it's plugged in or not, doesn't really matter.
But before you go on, are you saying that Trump is seeing the social medias deeper than the facade that we, the consumers, see it as? We, the consumers, see it as Facebook or Google or whatever, and he's seeing it as a DARPA operation?
Well, let me give a gross characterization of this. Trump is saying, hey, you're cutting into my tweets, man. You're shadow banning me. You're doing all this horrible stuff, which should be illegal. You don't even let me knock people off my site because they make nasty remarks, even though you knock other people completely off because of remarks people make underneath them. He saw this and he basically said, this has to stop. And then what happened? He called all the people, 1,600 of them, who had already made formal complaints against social media for their discriminatory actions against conservatives and other such things. And he called them together, especially the principal ones, into the White House, said he was going to have a summit, but he didn't. He just acknowledged them. And then he said, within a month, I am going to do something about this. So within 2 weeks, he said within 2 weeks to a month, And so within 2 weeks, he started, the word was out, a leak that he was writing an executive order. Basically, he's going to squish the social medias. Well, that executive order never surfaced now, did it?
No, it didn't.
Isn't that funny? But with the tenets of it, basically said, all of you cardboard cutout Silicon Valley cyber warlords who are nothing more than DARPA projects, put in simple terms, are fake. Now, we already know those fake cardboard cutouts have already taken their money out of their own companies. They've transitioned. They've moved on. They knew what was going to happen. We warned all of you years ago that this was going to happen, that they're all going to fall and falter. But our entire stock market is based upon FANG, the big Silicon Valley.
Well, wait a minute. That would mean our
lords.
whole stock market is based upon a DARPA operation.
That is correct.
Because this is, when you describe this, I see an old Western scene, where they have the facades of the Old West of the town. Behind it is the Hollywood set.
Exactly.
I mean, that's what Facebook and Twitter are. They're just facades of a greater operation to surveil Americans.
Right. Facebook, Amazon, Google, Alphabet, Instagram, PayPal, YouTube, Gmail, all of it. Nothing more than a government militarized, weaponized project stolen from patents of other people who didn't get any money or credit for it, turned into a weapon and is being experimented we're being experimented on with those weapons, yes.
But we wouldn't eagerly sign up for being the guinea pig of a DARPA project, so they had to make it eye candy. So it was the eye-popping and fun Twitter and Facebook, and then that's how they hooked us.
When I was in the military, a long, long time ago, we were doing studies on refresh rates on a screen. And those studies taught us that we can manipulate anybody with nothing more than having them look at a cathode ray screen, because we knew the frequencies and the colors that could simply manipulate the brain, turn the brain on, turn the brain off, set the brain into total anxiety, set the brain into total rage or euphoria. It doesn't matter. It's a frequency. And those frequencies coming off a cathode ray tube are now exacerbated even more with LEDs, light-emitting diodes. So what we're talking about is every single screen is programming you. And if you don't know that that these are spies attempting to do what? They want any stream of money to go through them so they can tax it. Now, by them, I mean the old world bankers who've been doing this for hundreds of years. We've put out intelligence reports on this to make sure that you get educated on the history of the Venetians and how it came through the Germans, the Dutch, the British into our U.S. Federal Reserve system, though, in fact, it's nothing more than a ripoff. So, from the beginning, you have to understand that all press, all media, from 1909, when the Imperial Press Union met and clearly stated that the largest, even till recently, it was the largest news agency in the world. It changed many names. The Brits always changed names. So it was the Commonwealth Press Union in the end, when it was the largest, and now it's been broken into pieces, as always. And so this control system was very clearly stated from the get-go, openly, that it was not only a white supremacist control mechanism for creating opinion in the populace, but it was also, through Reuters, Thompson, Havas, and Wolf, the news agencies, a way to control banks and money. And then later on the stock market and the price of gold and silver all ran through who? The Rothschilds and the London Exchange. That was ran by, who was the person who was working for them? Paul Reuters. So when we look at the news, I just got to frame that before I say anything now, okay? So when we see Comey recently being caught with his Daniel Richmond New York Times association, that this was a paid person, a paid lawyer who was a friend of his, Daniel Richmond, who was the conduit to the New York Times as a leak that was outside of the official leaking and the official press releases that were going on from Comey and his assistant Rebicki and the PR person for the FBI. And then we know Page and Strzok were giving out their information to Devlin Barrett, and we know all the leaking, all the releases from our sensitive agencies, intelligence agencies, to the press is institutionalized. Standard operating procedure. They're all being paid off. They get their dinners. They get their tickets. They get their free rides. Alvy Watkins got her, she practically got a Pulitzer for all of her incredible reporting when all she was really doing was being a prostitute and was being, of course, James Wolfe's, what would you call it? Prostitute. Whore.
Okay.
And prostitute, because she wasn't a whore because she was getting paid. Because when she was turning in her information to the news agencies that she was becoming a hero in, she was actually releasing top secret secure information, FISA court information, all kinds of information that directly from the Senate Intelligence Committee.
She was being a stupid whore because she was thinking that she was getting inside information when all that was happening is she was being fed the propaganda by Wolf so that she would go and report it in the news. And they're both being played.
That's correct. And I believe that Lisa Page was being played to some degree, and that Peter Strzok is the truly evil person here, which I want to always underscore this. As far as I know, he still works for the CIA. Okay, he was fired from the FBI, let go from the special counsel. The key person in every one of these issues of the conspiracy, whether it was from Clinton Foundation, Uranium One, to the Russian dossier, to you name it, whatever it is, Peter Strzok was there. And who was his boss in the FBI? Andrew McCabe.
And tell us about all these spies.
Well, as we had pointed out before, James Comey, that we one day sat down and off the top of the head of the conclave, we listed 28 treasonous crimes of Comey. After that, we laughed so hard, we stopped listing them. But they included a bunch of spies. Felix Sater, a number one spy. Joseph Mifsud, another one. Sergei Parachenko. On and on and on. Stephen Halper, Christopher Steele. These are all Comey spies.
All of them.
Oh, Carter Page.
Yeah.
On and on and on.
Did you get Felix Sater?
I mentioned Felix Sater
So
because he's one of the worst.
We've talked about them for a lot.
A lot.
But apparently that wasn't all of the spies.
Carter Page was paid. Felix Sater was paid.
People, listen. The FBI paid these people
to
go
Stephen Halper.
And spy on Trump.
They paid Stephen Halper, I think, $1.4 million for 4 different reports in areas that are not his expertise that he didn't even know about. That was the excuse for him trying to get, Sam Clovis and George Papadopoulos and everyone in the Trump campaign to come to his house so that he could get them to say they were interested in the 33,000 missing emails, which were never missing because obviously he had a copy. Where did he get them from? James Comey. We know from Christopher Wray that in James Comey's office, in the safe, were copies, two separate types of copies, one on a jump drive and one on 6 CDs, all 33,000 missing emails. Because why? That had to be there for the setup for the spies that were controlled by Comey. And so if you didn't believe us before, maybe you should start believing us now. Also that Goldman Sachs was involved with Bitcoin, ha ha ha. But if you didn't believe us before about all this, start believing it now, because we told you at the time the 28 treasonous crimes of Comey was the tip of the iceberg. We didn't have the sensitive information. That's what everybody knew. Well, they didn't notice, but it was public information that was documented, and the evidence was right in front of our eyes. So we put out the 28. Well, there were 3 other ones. There was a person named Ferrante, another person named Jordan R. Kelly, and another third person who, one after the next, Comey, completely against all protocols, 100% against what he preached against in his book, and every time he opened his big fat mouth said should be no connection between the FBI and the White House. He placed on the National Security Council an FBI agent who was reporting to him that was literally dispatched from his FBI group. Don't know if they were counterintelligence, but We'll come back to that in a minute. But he placed him on the National Security Council because he's not on that council unless invited. And so that's where all the sensitive information goes down. And as I told everyone long time ago, and now it's come to pass, Trump was getting his intelligence not from the 17 intelligence community members of the U.S. Intelligence Community, but he was getting it from just one of them, from the National Counterterrorism Center, and Joseph McGuire. And before him, there was another person there that Trump trusted because Trump knew, because he was told by Eric Prince that because we told you before it even started. And we told you exactly how it would go, and we have been right down to the T, except we said it would be a process crime that would be brought against Comey, is what we were saying. And we said it would probably be perjury. But it was leaking. Why? James Wolfe, who leaked the stuff to Allie Watkins, the prostitute, got 2 months in jail for the largest, probably, espionage leak, certainly out of the Senate Intelligence Committee or out of the Congress in history, but no, 2 months. And Allie, nothing happened to her. She released top secret, the highest FISA court secure documents, knowing that that's what they were, knowing she endangered national security, and nothing happened to her. So, why? It's a system that has been going on since 1909, created by the British. They brought it into the country, and they started with the New York newspapers, but in the end, they got all of them. So when people say it's the Rothschild, well, not really. It was this group, and we've named them, and there's going to be a big article on it by the writers of American for Innovation and the researchers of Michael McKibben soon, and we'll be doing an audio with him probably tomorrow on that, or perhaps on Monday. But the point is,
now, Thomas,
we've traced it back.
I keep telling you that there's no time and space in the internet. So people that come here a year from now to hear this information for the first time won't know what the Monday is.
Well, it doesn't matter.
I know, because people will come to these truths as they're prepared to receive them.
Some people, even as they're listening to us today, are awakening to what we said over 2 years ago in great detail, naming the people, naming the exact process, so on and so forth. Now, we didn't know about these 3 new spies. Holy cow, Jay Sekulow and his son and the ACLJ pulled this up somehow with a FISA court warrant, with a Freedom of Information Act on the FISA court and other places. And then this information leaked out. It came out, and it's shocking. Because just when Comey thought he was exonerated by Horowitz, because mind you, had William Barr decided to prosecute Comey, it would not have been prosecutable. That was already set up from the beginning. And that is because there is no such thing as a 302 acting as evidence. And the memorandum that Comey made, the 7 of them, 4 of which he kept, one of them was top secret. And he took it home, put it in a safe, showed it to 4 lawyers. That's all illegal. Okay. Now the leaking, he's going to get away with it. You want to know why? We told you this from the beginning. Because these are his words. He didn't do anything wrong. He was going to give it to the New York Times, but he thought, this is what he says in his book, this is what he says in public, and this is what he says in his testimony. He was going to give it to the writer at New York Times, but he thought that it would be inappropriate. So he gave it to his friend and said, hey, why don't you give it to him? That's a lie. This is the same system. James Comey had actually written for New York Times editorials and passed them to Daniel Richmond, who doctored them up a bit, and then gave them to the New York Times, and they printed them wholesale. That's the way that worked. There was nobody at the New York Times that he passed it to. That is a lie. How do I know this? Because it was a legal statement that he would be able to basically split legal hairs with later, which later is now. So when Michael Horowitz brought this against him, he knew that he could get off of the leaking charge because he had already set up all the excuses to get off. Plus he had immunity, and he already testified with immunity as the star, in my opinion, as the star witness. Not all the conclave members will agree with this. As the star witness for Robert Mueller's special counsel investigation. That's the only reason he could possibly come out and do his book, because he's been given full immunity on everything that Mueller asked him about. Now, here's the deal. That can be overturned. All they have to show is the fraudulent nature of the special counsel, or that there were leaks. There were leaks every day, Monday through Friday. The entire time, there were leaks. Okay, that alone, Contreras, there's all kinds of conflict of interest here. And so the case itself, which was not recommended by Mueller for prosecution because it couldn't be, and Barr certainly didn't prosecute anybody, Trump, his team, or anyone on those crazy conspiracy collusion, nonsense Russian charges, because it couldn't be. And so it can now go back, and if John Durham gets himself a team, and you'll know that something is happening, and I haven't seen this happen, when John Durham gets a team and we start hearing leaks, because Durham can't get a full, completely tight team, and so it will leak, and so we'll hear about the leaks. And we haven't heard that. What we see is that what we told you from the beginning, we told you some months ago, that Horowitz's report will be out before September. It was. And it won't convict anybody. And it won't indict anybody. So, out of the 7 charges that Horowitz was given to investigate, so far, we've seen McCabe's fake nonsense in a grand jury indictment, which then led to nothing, a recommendation for no prosecution, and the same thing with Horowitz. Same thing that he found one person, processed crime, sent it to the DOJ as a setup that he knew that Comey could get off of. And so Horowitz did his job. He's done now. He is the fixer. He is the covering up the trail. He is the cover-up artist. And so now Barr had to turn it down. So don't be discouraged by that.
You know, remember that day that we saw that James Comey was walking into the New York Times building, and we were told that he was giving information and wanted to write an opinion piece or something about all this. I'm like, what? The head of the FBI wants to write a piece and the New York Times is going to post it? I mean, that just seemed like crazy. But then we also know what a tight relationship the CIA and CNN have. So, Thomas, it is important to look at history. Speak to us, tell us how spies and lies became intelligence operations having tight relationships to what we see as fake news.
Well, Betsy, it's important to remember that if we go back in time, we're going to have to say literally letters and how they were delivered, usually through ships. And then later, believe it or not, carrier pigeons, or pigeons. I always call them carrier pigeons. They use pigeons to carry message from homing pigeons from one place to the next, right? And then they take it back to its...
We don't need to go back to the days of Rome about
you
the pigeons.
have to know
We've
this.
got this.
This is how the Jesuits did it.
The pigeons who carried things, they were carrier pigeons.
They were, yes, homing pigeons who had messages on them, and that was what the Jesuits did to control the Catholic Empire. Well, this was already known by the Venetians and others, and then it was brought into Europe by the bankers. And then, unfortunately, when Marconi stole the patent of Nikola Tesla, an American, by the way, citizen, and faked that it was his, and wireless was started, and the cables were laid. There were places where the cables weren't connected. They used pigeons, and they used the cables, and then they created codes that they put in their telegram messages about banking interests.
Now take your time, because
about
this
money.
is very important stuff.
Okay, so codes started to be developed. And then what they found is, lo and behold, if the bankers would use the telegraphy system, the telegrams, that they could be ahead of the newspapers reporting, they could be ahead of letters, they could be ahead of word of mouth. And so they started to manipulate through messages sent by telegram that were then picked up by news agencies. And news agencies at that point were a little bit independent. But they were very haphazard, and they usually just reported on banking interests because that's where the money was, and that's what people wanted to read. But then they found out, they could send a telegram from Timbuktu, from a news agent, from a journalist, from a spy that said there was a war going on there. And then, the British could send a bunch of soldiers there to quell the fighting. But no, that's not what they went there for. They went there because they found oil there, or they found some resource. And then they said, holy cow, what the British East India Company and the Dutch East India Company used to do, which is create propaganda for foreign wars, which were a cover for fleecing the resources of those nations. That became standard operating procedure for the imperialists of Britain, like Cecil Rhodes and Alfred Milner. And then we've uncovered the tracks of the Pilgrim Society, pulled together all of these literally hundreds and later thousands of news agents and journalists, and basically paid them off and made them swear an oath that they would report as spies directly to the Prime Minister of Britain, and at the same time spread Burroughs' welcome poisons in the form of pills, inoculations, and vaccines, which were then used to experiment on these nations to wipe out indigenous populations that they didn't want. It's a form of eugenics. We have the proof of all of this. So, folks, sorry to have to tell you, the media only wants one thing, the flow of your money. And if you don't have a flow of money, they want you either your vote or they want you dead. Why? There's too many people for them, but they still need the political machinations and so that they can appoint their judges, so they can appoint their people in Washington, D.C., so federalism can control us just like a monarch. Federalism is a monarchy. The only problem is not even the president's really in control. There's a group of aristocrats, the senior executive service members, most of whom call themselves generals, like the Attorney General calls himself a general. Each of the 64 federal agencies has a person in charge who's a senior executive service member. And no matter who the new president appoints, it doesn't matter. The bureaucracy of the SES is like the aristocracy of Britain. And mind you, those are citizens over there, right? No. They're not. They're subjects. They are slaves to the monarchy, whether they know it or not, whether they admit it or not. We've proven this so many times. The Queen's Privy Council, though, we now find out is a corporate interest that controlled Fleet Street, that controlled the propaganda arm that became what we know as media. And those are the spies they sent out in the military, in expeditions, for medical purposes, with these kits of these poisonous pills and vaccines, inoculations. We know that thousands were killed in the Transvaal when Cecil Rhodes, the father really of what they would call him probably the father of British imperialism, basically stole the gold and diamonds for the Rothschilds. This is literal. This isn't a conspiracy. In the Transvaal, and then, Rhodesia was named after him. He saw at that point that the Germans were his enemy and their competition, and the Dutch were getting in the way of imperialistic colonialism, British imperialistic colonialism, so wars happened. Tens of thousands of slaves were sent out, probably for medical experiments with these things we're talking about. And so what happened? Now we see the complete, perfect system of the British kind of moved into America, but it doesn't quite work because, unfortunately, they gave us the internet, and it was supposed to be a weapon used to control our opinion. Now we're using it to create the evidence, to show the evidence, to get a different opinion than what the spies and the major media are trying to control us with.
If you're a first-time listener and you're listening to us going, oh my gosh, what is this? Well, you might want to listen to this audio until it sinks in. Just play it again, because what we're telling you is the evidence, the conclusions that we're seeing after 3 years of deep research. Now, before we get off of the British imperialism, talk about what we're seeing in current events with Iran and Hong Kong. And
can I go back? Because yes, I drifted. Did you notice that?
Yes. But,
and you didn't pull me out of the weeds.
It's hard to, but I also want to then also discuss Boris Johnson, friend or foe, with President Trump, okay?
Bojo. I'm never, ever going to comb my hair again. I'm going full Bojo.
Yes, I understand. So, uninterrupted, take us where you want to go, but get to Boris at the end.
Get to Boris, because it's like, Boris and Natasha, it's kind of scary what's going on over there. And it does need to be explained, because don't be scared. It's exactly what we told you. We didn't predict exactly what would happen with Brexit, but we did predict the type of resistance and the way that it would work. Let's go back to Trump. Trump is there, and he says, okay, all of you people who've been conservative agents on the internet, you've been knocked off. Your livelihood's been stolen from you. And so he had sympathy with them, and he said he was going to call in all those Silicon Valley cyber lords. Well, what happened was he called in a few of them, didn't he? And then there was this executive order rumor. And then there was his order. In his order, he simply said this aloud. He told all agency heads to look into all issues concerning any cyber manipulation of the American virtual political landscape that tries to choose either one side or the other. And so basically he said, anyone who's being partisan in social media, I want you to take action. So we got to see a minor head of one agency called together the FBI, Homeland Security, and 3 or 4 different cyber lords. And what happened? Nothing. Matter of fact, she's completely an Obamite. Nothing's going to happen. And then what happened with the Federal Communications Commission? Okay, they can't do anything. All they can do is determine if there are antitrust purchases. So they have threatened, days after Trump did this, they threatened to go back and to undo any mergers of any of the Silicon Valley social media people who are stealing free speech in America, and undo any of the monopolistic unions that they might have had with other companies.
So he's closing the exit doors. And he's making sure that it's perfectly clear that these agencies were tasked with doing something and they failed, and he's going to do it all the way. Give everybody time to solve the social media situation.
Now, we happen to know he has a solution in his hands.
Yes.
We'll go there in a second. But the point is, he asked every single agency. And what did we hear? Crickets. We heard nonsense. Somebody got really excited and sent us that article where I don't even want to name the lady because she's so stupid and incidental, and what she did is nothing because she has no power. These agencies, 2 agencies, tried to do a little something, and that became the furor that we have never heard in the cyberland before, which is, oh my gosh, CEOs of Facebook, of Google, of Alphabet coming out saying, please, Mr. President, take us over. Okay, how is it that the largest companies in the world are begging the government to take them over? Okay, stop right there. Okay, we got to see Sundar Pichai come out and lie and say, oh no, we do not surveil anyone. We do not, in Facebook, we do not surveil anyone. No. Your privacy is intact.
Our apologies to all of our
Why did he
Indian
lie?
Listeners.
Why did he lie? Why did Richard Allen of Facebook come out and lie? Why did Nick Clegg come out from Facebook and lie? Wait a second. Every time they lie, in Australia, in Europe, in Liechtenstein, in Ireland, they were charged billions of dollars in fines. They've already got hit with one multi-billion-dollar fine for this silly Trump Cambridge Analytical nonsense, which actually never happened the way the media reports it. So here you have Zuckerberg, who knows nothing, sitting there going, why am I being charged billions of dollars? He had no clue. Why does he have the ex-prime minister of England come over, Nick Clegg, to take over Facebook? Think of this, folks. Why did Peter Thiel jump out and move his money over to Palantir? And why did Elon Musk jump out? Why is Elon Musk going nuts? Why did McAfee jump out of his own company? Why is McAfee going nuts? Why is Eric Schmidt going nuts? Why did Eric Schmidt jumped out of Google, then jumped out of Alphabet, then jumped to China and created Dragonfly and created the social credit and then come back and lie about it. He's gone nuts. Why are all these Silicon Valley people gone nuts? Because they're all fake and they know it, and they don't know what's about to happen. They thought they had an easy exit. They took their money out. No, they don't have an easy exit because Trump ain't making it easy for them. Here's what is happening, folks. We didn't realize this at first because we wanted the aggressive takeover of all of these groups and people put in jail for racketeering, not antitrust, not monopoly. No, not violating user agreements. No. This is a national security attempt to overthrow the president, and it is the very thing that we have that Trump is going to test every agency head and see what they do. They're not going to do nothing. And he's going to call in every single Silicon Valley cyberlord, and they're all going to cry and go nuts.
Why? Because what does he say to them?
He says the following to them. You all stole scalability on the internet from Leader Technologies, and I have their Miller Act notice here requesting to be paid. And I think I'm going to pay them, but I'm going to pay them with your money.
Yeah!
Now, not only that, we got to clean this system up. Are you willing to clean this system up? All of them have told him, no.
No.
Do you think they're willing to clean up? Do you think the mainstream media is willing to stop reading the prompters, the news that they haven't researched? They don't know who came up with those words. They simply read avid ISIS management prompters. Do you think they're going to stop that? No. That is over 120 years, 100 years of planning, 100 years of an institution. It's not going to change overnight, but it can change overnight because Trump is changing things that have been going for 50 years. He's going to change something.
Are you kidding? He's going to undo this whole China mess that we're in, that Hillary Clinton put us in with China.
In 1913, the Fed was created, and I believe with the second term of Trump that he will end the Fed. We don't owe them a penny. That is this system we're talking about. That is the mainstream media convincing you that the U.S. Federal Reserve tells you that you, as a taxpayer, have a debt and you need to have payroll taxes to pay that debt. That's insane. There don't need to be any payroll taxes, no IRS, no state taxes. And those taxes are when you buy something, you pay the tax to the state. The feds need to get out of the business of ripping us all off for payroll taxes. They need to get out of the U.S. Fed system, and the U.S. Treasury needs to take over.
British imperialism.
I'm drifting. Sorry. Going back. So Trump is right now waiting. He's already told these individuals, one at a time, I have the power over you. Please show me your original source code that makes you able to be scalable on the internet. And they'll say, well, we got it from IBM Eclipse Foundation. They said it was theirs. And then he says, no, they stole it. And then every one of those idiots falls back, goes to South America and takes some ayahuasca, goes to China and thinks that there's some Chinese king while they're actually getting poisoned, thinks that they're going to turn America into this vassal of China and China's going to lead the world. That's where Hillary Clinton went. That's where Kissinger went. That's where Facebook went. That's where Schmidt went. That's where Breyer went. That's where they all went. They put their chips on China. And we told you why China is losing on all counts because of Trump. Well, guess what? What we're talking about since 1909, that spies have 100% control of the media. Well, of course they do. The media was there to tell you if the monarchy or if the church were ripping you off and that you needed to depose tyrants. That's what the Fourth Estate is for. But we're telling you, since 1909, it has been filled with British Crown spies who answered to the Brits, not to Americans. And this is the same for the Associated Press, Reuters, Thompson, you name it. Why are there only a few news agencies in the world? Because it's all the same. And so when you tell me, thank you very much, Mr. Sukalo, that you discovered that Comey put 3 spies, one after the next, on the National Security Council, I say, yeah, it doesn't surprise me. But here's the surprise. When somebody tells you that the entire news media
including Fox News,
is 100% controlled by the same old people who've been doing it for 100 years, and they came from British control. And of course, we know who they are nowadays, and we know exactly who's controlling that, and it needs to end. The Fed needs to end. The UN, the United Nations, needs to end. Multilateral agreements with nations to attack other nations needs to end.
Senior executive service needs to move on.
And all these things are easily ended. Easily ended. Okay, what's happening with Silicon Valley? You need to put every one of their CEOs in jail for racketeering. And they know it. And then they're going to all spill their guts that they knew that they were doing this for the Department of Defense, and there's backdoors and everything, and the surveillance is there, and hey, this was part of the game, and you will find out who all was involved. And it's going to go right up to the White House, and it's going to go, Eric Schmidt was one of the key people bringing this digital cyber warfare to Obama. But Obama worked with, people like Dmitry Alperovich, one of the worst Russian hackers of all times, is the only person who ever looked at the DNC hack, which was not a hack. It was a breach, and it was the lie. And he's a part of the Atlantic Council. Anyone in the Atlantic Council is subject. How about Alexander Chalupa? How about all these people? You want to name spies? Okay. Anderson Cooper, Mad Cow, you name it, anyone on the news. They know that they didn't do that story. They didn't research the story. They didn't check the sources. But they all agree that if it comes across the Associated Press or Reuters Thompson, that it is as good as directly from the divine. And they read it aloud as if it's the truth. And Americans, here's the deal. You've been taught that if you hear it once, in the old days, you believed it. Nowadays, you need to hear it twice. Nowadays, because there's a lack of discernment and there's so much falsehood out there, you need to hear it from 3 sources and then you believe it's true. Well, guess what? Every one of your major mainstream media sources say the same thing, so you're going to simply believe what they tell you, and you're not going to do any research, and then you're going to get really upset just like they do when you are shown to be a hollow person because you're a hypocrite. You have no evidence behind what you think you believe. You believe it because you heard it from the media. And if you believe the media now, after what we have seen, then there's no hope for you. And I'm not going to call you names because I feel sorry for you.
Okay, so Brits. Let's go to the Brits and talk about their relationship to China and what's going on there.
China is British. China is a bad experiment of the Brits. But they never got out of British control. The big money always goes down through Singapore, Shanghai, and Hong Kong, all controlled by the Brits. HSBC and the people who did the deals for any of the oligarchs sitting on the Chinese Communist Central Committee. And remember, President Xi Jinping, they hate him now because he's become an oligarch and he's stealing like a madman. And he acted like he was the first emperor of China, Qin, because he said, one belt, one road. You're going to do it my way, or I'm going to squish every country that gets in my way. And if you mention that Taiwan exists, I'm not doing business with you again. In other words, he's so insane that he believes that if he thinks that his number one enemy, Taiwan, doesn't exist, it doesn't exist, and you can't do any business with China if you acknowledge that Taiwan exists. This is the insanity of China, and the Brits are just as insane because they believe in monarchs too. What is communism? Communism is nothing more than what the Chinese learned from the British monarchy. Total dictatorial insanity based upon complete loose associations where you're using the Venetian method of a small committee answering to one person, and that one person is supposedly the divine on earth. Well, that isn't the way it works. Kim Jong-un isn't divine. President Xi isn't divine. Queen Elizabeth isn't divine. None of them are divine. Look at the countries that overthrew those monarchies because of their absolute insanity. Look at one of the greatest of them all, the Sun King, Louis XIV of France, one of the most decadent people on the face of the earth, and yet he's still sung as the eternal king, the way it was supposed to be, because he stole from the people and built Versailles. I've been to Versailles. Very nice. It's useless now. They use it for movie sets. Okay? He bankrupted his country over time for his own decadence. So the point is, don't believe in judges. They think they're monarchs. Don't believe in lawyers. They think they're esquires, landed gentry, aristocrats, peerage. Those are all lies. Nobody's better than anybody, and if they try to tell you you don't have standing in America in a court, then it's probably a federal court.
Yes, but we have been indoctrinated in our public schools. We have a different understanding of what happened after the American Revolution. And, wasn't it, at least it was for me, growing up, I would go, gee, why are we doing things this way when our Constitution says it should be done this way? Why are we struggling over Second Amendment rights when it clearly says no law shall be passed that would infringe upon our right to hold a gun? I couldn't resolve the discrepancies until I stepped outside of that and asked myself the question, well, maybe the world doesn't work the way that I was taught it works. And that's exactly what it is. And I invite all of you to step into another realm to see the way the world is working around you and why people don't, these people like James Comey and where is Ruth Bader Ginsburg and those kinds of things, they're operating on a different platform than we are.
Yes, and you have to, unfortunately, use the eyes of evil to see evil. If you're a good person, you're not going to see this, so don't feel bad that you don't know it. Why do I know it? I work for those people. I saw the evil. I saw that they would kill someone without any compunction whatsoever, right in front of me. The man standing next to me killed. What happened? Nothing.
Or that you can look and see how many people have been suicided around Hillary Clinton and nothing gets done. It's because they are operating in a totally different system.
They're not going to tell you that in basic training that when they give the inoculations, people die. They say they died in training. When you hear these died in training, those are usually inoculations.
And they just bury their mistakes anyway.
Correct. And they're experimenting on these soldiers, and that's the reason the soldiers are committing suicide. Not only that, poppers, active denial was being used, and that is what is causing a lot of these suicides, is the active denial milliwave or millimeter wave, which is 5G, which they're going to put everywhere in America, is what's causing a lot of these suicides. So let's just open your eyes if you want to have discernment. But when you do, let me just give you a perfect example. China and Syria. Oh, China sent their largest troop ship to Syria twice. Did anybody notice that? As far as I know, besides that it was reported, I don't hear anybody saying a word about it. Did it dock in Syria? No, it did not. Where did it dock? In Turkey. And if you look at the water lines before and after they left, they took over 500,000 people, crammed into that as human trafficking, as slaves. Those were the good workers who left Syria, went to Turkey as refugees, bombed by Obama, some of the 58 million refugees created by Obama, 2 million dead. And they took the good workers, put them on the ship, took them to China twice. And what did we hear? We heard Russia say, well, we don't know why China's showing up. We didn't invite them. Syria said, I don't know why China's here. Turkey didn't say a word. Okay. How about the fact that China has already broken all of the Syrian sanctions, but we still do business with them? Not possible. We can't do any more business with them. How about the fact that China broke all the sanctions with North Korea? Well, why are we doing any more business with China? We know that China has threatened Taiwan now with military aggression, so that is a declaration of war. No one will even mention it. Why are we doing business with China? China killed 8 to 20 million Tibetans. Why are we doing any business with China? China in the South Sea has built islands so that they could control the South Sea, so that they could challenge everyone there. Why are we doing any business with China? Because of Hillary and Bill Clinton. Period. They sold out America to communism. So when you want to talk about spies, you want to talk about the Chinese spies, Hillary and Bill. They're the ultimate spies, along with Kissinger at this point, Steve Bannon and others. Jack Ma. Why do we even let Jack Ma into this country? Why do we let anybody using Dragonfly or social credit systems have any access to our economy whatsoever? That's why Trump did what he did. If you're connected to Chinese, Huawei, in some cases FTE if they didn't change their phones, in some cases Lenovo if they didn't change their laptops, they're all banned now. 27% GDP decrease in 1 year with Trump with the tariff wars. This is not a tariff war. This is open warfare. How about the fentanyl attacks on America through our southern border by China? They can get one seizure of fentanyl that will kill everyone in America. Okay, that's not an accident, folks. That's not drugs. That is an attempt of war actors to destroy every person in America. Our southern border at one point had Chinese signs up because so many pregnant Chinese women were pouring across our southern border. They're all here now, and they're using anchor baby status, and they'll get, free education. They'll penetrate our colleges. And by the way, there's a Chinese society group in every major college in America that they are finding out is the number one spy vehicle in America, besides the fact that Silicon Valley has been infiltrated by China, Hollywood has been infiltrated by China, every major West Coast real estate, high prime real estate bought by China. That's all on purpose. We're doing to China what we did to Japan. Let them buy it at full price. Let it all crash. Let them crash, let their currency crash, and their equivalent to our dollar is worth less than a penny. That's what happened to Japan, and all they have to do is change one rule in China. And if they change one rule in China, there's no more stock market. And then China is not playing the capitalism game. They're trying to play capitalism game with communist methodology, and it is the grossest thing that I've ever seen to calling civil society. It is not in any way. Pray for President Trump because he's in there sometimes one-on-one fighting it out with Melania
by his side,
covering his back. That's right, by his side. And without her, he couldn't do this. Pray for them because what he's doing now is unprecedented in history, and it's going to finish the first American Revolution and fly those 13 circular star flags as much as you can, because that's the original flag that had nothing to do with slavery. That's later. It had everything to do with getting away from the slavery of Britain. And folks, we're not there yet.
No, and everyone in the world is affected by British imperialism.
That's right.
And that's why we all united, people around the world, by flying that flag, say you want out of British control.
That's right. 5 eyes. We're one of the eyes. The other 4 are Britain in the disguise of Britain, the United Kingdom, Canada, Australia, New Zealand. And when you say United Kingdom, you say 54 other nations. So our information is going out to over 50 other nations to be used against us, all through British imperialism. Okay? That's just a tiny sample of what we have discovered for you and put in our intelligence reports, along with the good help of the staff writers over there at Americans for Innovation, who are amazing, and Betsy and her cat report, and the anonymous patriots for the American intelligence media.